Am I? Where am I? Ah, all right, hold on one second, guys. Technical difficulties here. What happened to my camera? We were all good. We were all good. What happened to my camera? There we go. Well, I don't know what happened there. Who knows? Anyway, that's the fun thing about computers and being live. You never know what's going to happen. So, anyway, happy to be here again. Alida Hernandez, Rebooted Mindset. I haven't been live for a couple of weeks. I haven't been feeling well myself and trying to figure out what is going on. And not quite easy, especially when you're in a new area trying to find, the proper doctor that I'm looking for. But anyway, still in search of and always looking for help from everywhere out there. And today I have an incredible guest today. I know we're going to learn a lot from him. I was on his website called Humanity Restored Humanity. This is his website, and it is Dr. David Stevens. Now, Dr. David Stevens is the founder and president and CEO of Humanity Restored. He has a doctoral degree in clinical psychology and emphasis on neuropsychology. So his areas of expertise is science generally, neuroscience, the brain function, and that's the system of mental health. So we're really tuning in today is regarding mental health and how we can restore, like what's going on in that brain of ours, right? What can we do to make it better, to make it stronger, or to keep it stronger? Those are my questions that I'll have. Plus, that I have family members with Alzheimer's and dementia, so that falls on another realm of the mental wellness. So, so anyway, with further ado, I'm going to bring in Dr. David Stevens so we can start this conversation. And everybody, hopefully get on. People are coming in now. I see them coming in, so I appreciate you coming in. And hello, Ben, and see who else comes onto the show. So let's bring in Dr. Stevens. Oh, what? I lost my. Until I haven't been on here for a little while. I forgot what I have to do. Oh my goodness gracious, that's so funny. Hello, Dr. Stevens.
Hello.
Happy that you are here, and to learn more about the brain. I guess let's talk about the brain and how you got into this. How did you get into studying, psychology and getting really engrossed in learning about the brain function?
Well, it really began with the first semester in college. I took an undergraduate psychology course, and early in that course, we started talking about the brain, and I was immediately fascinated by it and have never lost that fascination.
Mm, that's awesome. That's a good thing to be fascinated about because it's an intriguing organ, right, in our head.
Yes.
And I had a couple of, I think the last podcast that I did, I had a friend of mine, Jessica, and she had a brain issue that they did a live surgery on her. She was awake
Oh,
while they
right.
were doing it at the Broward North here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Hmm.
And she's great. I don't know what they did. It was a miracle what they did there.
Yes, my daughter is also a neuropsychologist,
Mm,
and it was prior to COVID, but she was just getting ready to start doing neuropsych testing during live brain and awake brain surgery to determine if the surgeons were encroaching on certain parts of the brain. Unfortunately, COVID kind of killed that project, but
mm.
it is happening some places that even during awake brain surgery, some testing can happen to see what's happening with brain function in the moment.
Mm. Yeah, that's it's an incredible thing that they're doing now. I mean, they're getting more and more
Right.
advanced with technology involved in surgery. I think that's helping people. But the
Hmm.
brain is so complex. I mean, I had a stroke like 8 years ago, so I know I found I was stuck in that moment that my brain was affected because I didn't have oxygen to my brain for a certain period of time, and I
Yes.
lost function complete, not complete, but like 50% on the left side. Which
Oh,
thank God I'm good now. But
that was so
that's
great.
when I learned. That's when I started learning about the brain, like what's going on? Like my brain knows how to move,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't sending the signal or something correctly to the for the movement to happen.
Right. And
So it's
go ahead.
no, I said it's just very intriguing how you can think something, but then if the brain is damaged in that section of the brain that moves the leg, then you're having to kind of like relearn everything all over again.
Yes. And the brain, one of the ways it's described is that it's a self-organizing system. So after a severe head injury, after a stroke, those sorts of things, the brain reorganizes. People have probably heard the term neuroplasticity, and finds different pathways, different functions to achieve the same day-to-day functional outputs. So the brain kind of reconfigures itself and adjusts to make restoration of function possible.
Wow. Well, I know that my brain has come, back to normal, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
I have some physical limitations, but who knows? It's a combination of physical and brain function and all that stuff.
Right.
And so I was very intrigued when I got your email, because anything when it comes to mental health, different things that people don't really like dive into, not somebody's going to go, oh, let me get a book on brain health. No, nobody does that. Right.
Right.
Even though you should, especially
Mm-hmm.
that they said the leading cause of death right now is Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And it's really sad. I see my mother has Alzheimer's. She was diagnosed with it. The short-term memory is, it's being affected right now. But
Mm-hmm.
of course, she knows she can still play Chopin. I had a recording today
Wow.
I recorded her today. She's playing Chopin and Beethoven on the piano because she's learned that since she was a little girl. She's not going to forget that.
Right.
It's all the new stuff that's the problem.
Mm-hmm. And is she having great difficulty with remembering things that happen day to day, or remembering conversations, that kind of thing?
Yeah, on a short term, yeah. Because, for example, my husband took her outside for a minute to show her something, and then we came back in, and I said, "Ma, did you like that? JC saw you, took you to see something," and she's like, "What are you talking about? I didn't go outside." Like she didn't even remember. She just went out.
And
So,
how long had it been?
that she's like this?
No, how long had it been since she went out? Then
Like
she didn't remember
like
being outside.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's very short, very or less. I mean, she could literally go out. So we figured it out that she likes to walk outside. So I let her go walk up down the street, and she comes back, and that's good exercise.
Right.
But we realized the reason she goes out 5 or 6 times is she doesn't remember she walked. So I see her on the camera. Go, where's my mother going back out again? And I go, 5 times she went out.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I tell her, she gets upset with me, so I have to be careful what I say, because she's like, "My God," and she gets upset. It's heartbreaking. At least my mother's still functioning well. It's just my aunt is the one with the dementia. She fell. She actually fell and hit her head, and since then, it just gradually got worse and worse and worse. And now it's the stage of, she doesn't know that she has to take a shower or know what to do in the shower or brush her teeth. Like basic functions are starting to move,
And how long ago did your aunt hit her head?
She fell about 7 years ago.
Okay.
About 7, yeah. And the doctors didn't do anything. They gave her some medicine, and I said, "But you don't even know what you're labeling her with dementia." Dementia is a big word. It's like anything, It's like it's just a general term. And I said she has some kind of brain damage when she fell because she hit her head on the ground in the street. But she braced her. Thank God she put her arm. She broke her arm, but she braced herself so she didn't get as much. But still,
but you noticed significant decline following that injury.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
it's getting worse and worse over the years, right? And then we moved recently. So we moved about 7 months ago. And that the movement, of course, moving to another place, it took a little bit for adjustment, for the new house and where's the bed and where's the bathroom kind of thing. But they're fine now.
Good.
So but
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, one of the things that's so important for people watching today and just really everybody to learn that our brains, their function, or the brain's function can be restored even after a significant head injury, after a stroke, after all those things, that the restoration process happens as we get the brain refueled. And that's a relatively new understanding and insight that really much more important than what happens with tissues or bruising to the brain or whatever is the effect of fueling. And when the brain loses fuel, then it loses function.
Mm.
And
Is that
so,
when you get like a brain fog? What is that like cause from? Is that
yeah,
just like lack of oxygen or lack of fuel, basically, you're saying to the brain?
yes, lack of fuel to the brain is the primary cause of brain fog, and many, many other, even kind of everyday symptoms that people struggle with. A very frequent one is that people know the word they want to use, but they can't think of it. That's
Mm.
a very common thing, and that is due to insufficient fuel or glucose to the brain. And your aunt, with her head injury, lost a significant amount of fuel to the brain, and so lost function from that point on.
Right. Exactly. And it's just sad because there's so many people out there like that.
Mm-hmm.
And being like, my aunt was a branch manager of a bank for 30 years.
Well,
A woman who can handle money and organize and everything. And now, she's just a shell of a person that's she was. She doesn't
mm-hmm.
really have interest in much anymore, because she's just forgetting things. I notice now the words are starting to forget. She's starting to forget some words and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. Yeah.
But just now starting to forget words or names, that kind of.
Yeah, it just recently. I know, like, there's a little, like, the shower thing just started. That just started recently. Um, Sometimes she gets a little agitated because of course, you lose your independence, right? As you get
Mm-hmm.
older, you lose your independence. So, and I cared like too much for them. So now I'm not feeling well because it's too much. But because I'm always worrying about them. Are they okay? Did they
Sure.
eat? All those things because they live with me. So,
Mm-hmm. And it's very good actually for the prognostic outlook for her that she's just now starting to have more difficulty remembering words. Um, People can recover from virtually any kind of brain trauma, any kind of brain or mental condition, even from physical conditions when we get their brain refueled. In some cases, and this is probably more theoretical than actual, I have not encountered this, but theoretically, if somebody is at a very advanced stage and
Mhm.
they've had dementia for, let's say, 15, 20 years, then it may be that their brain can't be fully refueled and fully restored. But short of those very extreme cases, everybody can get their brain function back.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. I need a little help in the brain myself. So, and to hear that, that's why I was excited to see, because you talked here about head injuries, like you said, different things. So my question is, what is this glucose that you talk about there? What is that you were missing glucose? Because my word glucose for me is like when you're diabetic, you got
Mhm.
glucose, right?
Right.
So your pancreas creates the insulin and so on, and
Hmm.
then of course the medications out there try to cut that. So my question is that interfere with the glucose that goes to your brain?
The injuries do interfere with glucose to the brain. So, just a little bit of background that humans are absolutely dependent on glucose. If our brains don't have enough glucose, that will kill us. If our bodies don't have enough glucose, that will kill us.
I see.
And interestingly, the brain glucose system and the body slash blood glucose systems are two distinct and separate systems. People have thought that they were all the same thing, but they function differently and they can even be fueled differently, the body slash blood and the brain. And so when people have a bump on the head, when they have a concussion, if they have a traumatic brain injury, if they have surgery, childbirth, if they fall, don't even have to hit their head. All of those things result in glucose being limited to the brain. And as the brain loses flow of glucose, then we start to lose function. And the more loss of fuel to the brain, then the worse the function is.
So how do we get this glucose to the brain? Is it something that we eat, or something we have to do in our bodies
Yeah,
that
the
to help it?
normal way our brains get glucose is we eat food. A portion of that food is converted to glucose in the stomach and also a little bit in the liver, and then it goes to the brain. When the blood vessels in the brain have glucose, then it can cross what's called the blood-brain barrier and get from the bloodstream into the brain. And that's the normal way that our brains get glucose. But with every activation of what's called the sympathetic nervous system, or the fight or flight or freeze system is what some people know it by, what happens is that blood-brain barrier is controlled by little cells in the capillaries in the brain, and they kind of open up the blood-brain barrier so all the glucose that's in the blood can get into the brain. And again, that's after an activation of the sympathetic nervous system. We see it more obviously like with a concussion or a traumatic brain injury or some of those things I've seen. But it can happen with if you bump your head on a cabinet, or if somebody jumps out and scares you, or if you get pulled over by a policeman for speeding. Any of those kinds of things activate the sympathetic nervous system. What happens is those little cells, they're called pericytes in the brain, at that moment open up the blood-brain barrier. So like I said, all the glucose that's in the blood can get to the brain. That lasts for about 20 minutes. If it lasted longer than that, the brain would take all the glucose that's in the blood and use it for itself, which would deprive the body of glucose, which could be very dangerous. So after about 20 minutes, then the brain, those pericytes, tighten the blood-brain barrier, but they make it even a little tighter than it was before. And so you lose a little bit of glucose permanently to your brain following that event. And then the next time you have a sympathetic nervous system activation, same thing happens. The pericytes open up the blood-brain barrier, all the glucose flows into the brain. That lasts about 20 minutes. Then it tightens it up, and it tightens it up even more again than before. So you lose a little bit more glucose to your brain permanently. And as that continues, we start to lose function. And
Wow.
it's kind of interesting. I work with people in their 30s that will say, I don't remember names anymore. I don't remember words. I have headaches. I have ear ringing. I have all these symptoms. And I think it's just because I'm getting older, but it really has nothing to do with aging.
Wow.
It is just progressive loss of glucose to the brain.
Wow.
And so we can restore glucose to the brain by having people actually take glucose directly.
Oh, okay. We'll Beverly will be talking after this because I need some for my brain. 'Cause I've been suffering with brain fog for a while now, and it's physical. And now I've manifested physically. I'm having some issues, and I didn't have this before. So I know that when you said about the fight and flight, so when a person goes through like extreme stress or all that stuff, that's affecting your brain.
It is.
And that's causing the lack of glucose going to your brain?
Well, it kind of depends. You kind of have to cross that threshold where the sympathetic nervous system is activated to have that process that I talked about earlier, whereby the blood-brain barrier is opened wide, all the glucose flows in for about 20 minutes, then it's tightened up.
Right.
But just chronic stress or even immediate stress burns glucose faster. So there are really two important things to know about restoring full and complete brain function. And like I said, no matter what the condition, if it's a mental illness, if it's a physical illness, if it's a cognitive problem, all of those can be completely eliminated by the brain being fully fueled.
Wow.
And so getting enough glucose is critical, but then also reducing high glucose burning. So stressful situations, if they don't quite rise to that level of a sympathetic nervous system activation, still burn the available glucose faster. And
Mm.
when you have limited glucose and high glucose burning, you quickly get to the place of not having enough. And that's, again, where symptoms happen.
Okay, so you can get like brain confusion or um, how do you call it? Like not ability to focus,
Right.
just interruption in the brain.
Yes. And every brain is a little different in how it responds to low glucose. So our brain's primary job is to keep us alive immediately. And then its secondary job is to keep us alive longer term. And then its third job is to help us function. So the brain always prioritizes staying alive now, staying alive a little bit longer term, and then function. But every brain will decide what functions it needs to fuel in the moment. So, and we don't always agree with our brain's determination, so to speak. So I might want to get rid of the brain fog, but my brain knows that actually fueling my immune system is more important in that moment. So it will fuel the immune system and not fuel the things that result in brain fog. And so then we have the brain fog.
Ah,
And so
okay.
that's also why symptoms can kind of alternate. That some days you have maybe floaties in your vision and other days you don't. Sometimes maybe you have ear ringing, other days you don't. And when you have a good amount of fuel but not complete fueling, that will happen. That you'll have temporary kind of appear and then go away symptoms. As you lose more brain fuel, those symptoms become more and more permanent and more severe.
Mm. Wow, very. The brain is a complex organ, that's for sure. It's,
Yes.
it's really amazing. I don't know. Have they studied the brain to the point they know exactly where every part of the function is on the brain? Have they?
Well, what a great question. It's been thought for centuries, literally, that there are specific functions that come from specific parts of the brain. And the technical term for that is called localizationalism. So, in other words, people will say that language is primarily on the left side of your head,
Mm.
here and here. One is for expressive language, which means us talking. The other is understanding language. But as it turns out, language is processed at many different places in the brain. And
Mm.
so the way I say it is that every function that we have is multiply represented in our brain. So if we had an injury that actually killed, destroyed tissue or cells, we wouldn't necessarily lose that function because there's other places in the brain that also do that. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
really a brilliant design that many places in the brain can do many different functions.
Mm.
So it will keep adapting and adjusting. But what it can't ultimately adapt to is too much loss of fuel.
Okay. Yeah. Once you lose too much, then you get permanent damage. That you're saying.
Right. Yep. Until the fuel's restored. So
Oh, okay.
people
Oh,
can
okay. Like you
people
said, you
can
can
be in
still
a
restore
coma,
it.
and a coma is just only enough glucose in the brain to regulate breathing, heart beating, that kind of thing. If they get more fuel to the brain,
Mhm.
then more functions come back online. And when the brain is fully fueled, then all the functions are online and working the way they should.
Oh, this is very interesting.
Yeah.
So you were saying that we need the specific glucose, right, for this brain function. Is this something that we can get
Yes.
through foods, or is it something that we have to take a supplement for?
Well, we get glucose all the time. The way we're designed is not that we have to eat certain foods that have glucose in them, but we eat foods, and a portion of everything we eat gets converted to glucose. And then what happens normally is that goes into our bloodstream and is distributed throughout our body and even into our brain. But more good news is there are multiple pathways that can get glucose to the brain. And this has not yet been proven, but it appears that when we take glucose directly, that gets into the cerebral spinal fluid and gets directly to the brain. So the very first time I gave somebody glucose, this was a guy, 41-year-old guy. He estimated 15 concussions in his life.
Ooh.
He was having road rage. He was having depression. He was having memory problems at 41 years old. So I didn't know any better at the time because nobody else had ever done this. But I'd done the research about glucose being completely safe in any amount. And so I gave him 3 or 4 glucose tablets that you can buy over the counter at Walgreens or Walmart or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I gave him 4 or 5 tablets. He took them, and probably 15 seconds later, he turned to his wife and said, "You know that pressure that's always in my head?" And she said, "Yeah." He said, "It's gone." And
What?
she was kind of, that was her reaction, although she just said, "No, it's not." And he said, "No, really, it's gone." And so it literally took 15, or I didn't time it, but roughly 10 to 15 seconds for the
Wow.
glucose to get from his mouth to his brain and already reduce, or actually eliminate, the pressure that he always felt in his head.
Wow.
So by
That's unbelievable. Wow.
yeah, so by taking it, it gets, again, I think it's into the cerebral spinal fluid, but gets to the brain literally within seconds. There's not time for it to get to the stomach and then back up to the brain. So it's getting there via this different pathway. But by taking glucose directly, and this is an important point, that the glucose is getting, most of it is getting directly to the brain, not even going to the body. So it's not like you're just loading up on sugar when you take
Okay.
glucose.
Okay.
Your brain is getting more of the glucose it needs to function the way it should.
Okay. That's what I was going to. That was my next question. Asking for people, like if people are diabetic or something, is it something that's going to affect them? Because aren't those the same tablets they use for diabetics when the sugar goes down?
It is. But it will affect them, but in exactly the opposite way that people think. So I've treated at this point hundreds of people with type 1 or type 2 diabetes. And every single one of them, as they take more glucose, their blood sugar lowers. And that's because blood sugar regulation is really a brain function, not a pancreatic function, even though the pancreas, of course, plays a role with insulin. But ultimately, regulating blood sugar is controlled by our brain.
Wow. Everything's controlled by our brain, basically.
Right.
Everything.
Yep. Absolutely
We
everything.
just don't realize it. We just don't realize what's going on in the body. I mean, the body is doing 100,000 things right now that our brain is doing.
Right.
It's helping us talk. It's helping us see. It's helping us hear. Everything we're doing is function of the brain. And that's why I started this podcast, over 2 years ago, because when I went through this, right, when I had the effect of the brain,
Right.
I went, I didn't document it as much as I realized it. I guess I wasn't thinking of doing that at the time,
Right.
but I was really just intrigued on how I had, what they said I had, just oxygen loss to my brain, no bleeding.
Right.
And for I don't know how long. All I know is I woke up in a dream. The dream woke me up. And the dream, it said, "Miss Hernandez just had a stroke." Just like that, in my
Wow.
dream. And I opened my eyes and I go, did I have a stroke? What the heck was that about? Like, it was like, it woke me up,
During the
and
stroke.
during the stroke,
Yeah.
it woke me up and told me I was having a stroke.
Right.
It's like God told me right there, like in my brain, wake up, you're having a stroke. And I woke up and I was so confused. Now my brain's confused. So I'm like, and I couldn't move my arm. I thought I was having a heart attack or something. And I was still in denial. I guess I was in a denial phase.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, oh, I'll try to go to the bathroom. I remember I couldn't move properly, but still not thinking that something's wrong, right? Mm-hmm. So I just try to do my movement. I get to the edge of the bed, and when I went to get up, I just fell on the floor because I couldn't walk.
Right.
So my roommate was like, "Oh, we need to go to the emergency room." I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "No, now," because my whole left side was, twisted and everything. Mm-hmm. And but thank God I was only in the hospital for like 2 or 3 days, and I responded very well. They said that I was lucky, really lucky that, nothing else severe happens. At that time, my sugar, my diabetes that I had was uncontrolled at the time, and my blood pressure had gone up. So the combination of the two, and it's like, I felt like my brain exploded. That's why I called this Rebooted, because I literally got rebooted.
Right. Yeah.
I told everybody I got rebooted, so now I got to clean it up and try to make it better.
Right. And so if you don't mind saying, did you have type 1 or type 2 diabetes at the time of the stroke? Yeah.
Type 2.
Because your brain, fortunately for you, had enough glucose that it could reboot and reorganize. If you'd had type 1 diabetes, which always means if somebody has high blood sugar, that means they have low brain glucose or brain sugar. And so type 2 diabetes is a less severe form of that and means that the brain still is getting more glucose. So again, the great news for you is you had enough glucose that your brain could use it to reorganize. If you'd been very low, it wouldn't have been able to do that.
Right. Yeah, the blood sugar. Yeah. Because I remember a couple of times when I was on taking medication prior to that sometimes my sugar would go too low. Mm-hmm. And then I would start shaking and I would feel weird, like my brain was shutting down. It literally felt like I was shutting down. And I would be like, I need food now. I would like start eating orange juice, anything just to, bring it back up. And it's really scary. People don't understand that. They say when your glucose, right, if you go too low, like you said, then you can go into diabetic coma and die, basically, because your brain has nothing to function. Right. It's like no oil in the car, right?
Right. It's exactly what that is. Yep.
So I need an oil change.
Right. Excuse me. And even more specifically, you need to have your gas tank filled up, and make sure that your brain's getting the fuel that it needs.
Yeah. And
so when it's low, that's when you have problems. But the thing that you're talking about is also interesting. I talk about, we have 3 humans, plants, and animals, all of us have 3 primary fuels that we must have to stay alive and to function fully. And that's water, oxygen, and glucose. Mm. And so maybe people in the audience have heard about people that have concussions doing what's called hyperbaric oxygen, which is getting more oxygen to the brain. But that treatment is only effective when you're actually getting the treatments regularly. If you stop, then the other functions don't come back because there's not enough glucose. And wow. Interestingly, glucose actually helps get oxygen to the brain and to get water to the brain. Glucose, its entire composition is 6 grams of carbon in the glucose molecule. 6 atoms of, once again, 6 molecules, of carbon in the glucose molecule, 12 atoms of hydrogen or water in the glucose molecule, and 6 atoms of oxygen. That's the entire makeup. But glucose delivers oxygen to the brain and to the cells as well. So it helps make up for oxygen deficit, but we must have all of those fuels to function the way we should.
Wow. Wow. It's just unbelievable. So how long has this research been going on? I know you have your website there.
Yes.
You want to talk a little bit about that, about Humanity Restored.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of reading it. It's very in depth. So maybe you can give us a Cliff Note version of
Yeah.
remember Cliff Notes?
And so I've been doing this for 7 years, actually 7 years and a couple of months now, and have worked with over 1,500 people, all of whom, when they've completed the treatment, their function has been completely restored. Body, brain, all functions. And so the short version, like you talked about, is when I meet with people, I want to know about their history of head injury, their history of trauma, history of what I call glucose limiting events, things that have activated the sympathetic nervous system. And very often when I start talking to people, at first I'll say, have you had any concussions? Have you had any falls? And very often people will say, no, nothing like that. Any trauma? No, that never happened. But then as we talk, it's like, well, wait a minute. There was that time when I crashed my bicycle and I had black spots in my vision. Or there was the time when I was playing soccer and I headed the ball and I saw stars. Or there was the time when I fell down the stairs when I was a baby or whatever. But everybody has had multiple glucose limiting events. Even as a toddler learning to walk, just falling down on your rear end is enough very often to activate that sympathetic nervous system and result in a glucose limitation. And so even things like anger, impatience, like you mentioned earlier, poor concentration or attention, all of those things are due to low glucose.
I gotta get some glucose.
So then the process is that I work with people to take glucose and I have them increase the amount they're taking until we get to symptom elimination. And by that, I mean they're not having any more of any kind of symptom. No more headaches, no more brain fog, no more anxiety, no more depression, no more autoimmune disorder, no more other kinds of diabetes, autism.
The thyroid also.
Yep, all of that. And so then when all of those symptoms are gone and the person tells me that their brain is functioning at 100% of its capability, then we know the brain is getting all the fuel it needs and its function has been restored.
Wow.
And then I recommend that people go on a maintenance dose to make sure that they're getting enough glucose day in and day out to meet their daily needs.
So how long is the usual time frame for a person? Is it like months, years, or?
Yeah, the most common amount of time is 6 months, but that's really for the vast majority of people. But people that have had many physical ailments, digestive troubles, like I said, autoimmune disorders, cardiovascular problems, people with autism, sometimes people with diabetes, that can be more like 6 to 9 months maybe.
Right.
And dementia, that may be more like, depending on the person, but more like 9 to 12 months. Sometimes people with autism, it's 9 to 12 months. Some people, it takes even a little longer than that, but generally 6 to 12 months is the amount of time it takes for the vast majority of people. And like I said a minute ago, most commonly it's around 6 months.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. I hope those I watch football, so I hope those players out there know about this stuff, because every time I see a head injury at the game, I'm like, sorry, my doggy's barking over here.
That's right.
I know the little one wants to get into the conversation.
Yes.
But anyway, I see people like that that had brain injuries, more trauma, things like that, and you worry about the young. They're so young,
Yes.
so
And
they
so I
have.
would say the awareness is growing among football players. I've treated, I would say, several, and I'm treating several now, former NFL players, have treated a decent number of former college football players, soccer players. But I don't know if you're familiar with what's called CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
No.
It was
What's
the subject of the 2015 movie Concussion.
okay?
So NFL players back then in the early 2000s and then moving forward, a number of them killed themselves by shooting themselves in the chest because they hoped somebody could figure out what was wrong with their brain.
Wow.
And the mechanism between CTE and Alzheimer's is very similar. That because of limited glucose, then there's a buildup of what's called tau protein in the brain that you can technically only diagnose at autopsy. But that's what causes the functional problem. And I've treated literally also hundreds of people with CTE, all of whom have recovered.
Wow. That's incredible. Is that also like PTSD? Is that another thing too? That kind of trauma that people go through, like the veterans out there that have gone through, horrible shootings or whatever's going on.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Originally, when I was first starting to do this, I thought it was specific to concussions or head injuries,
Mhm.
but I was doing evaluations, disability evaluations for veterans at the time. And a number of them would say to me, no, I didn't. I never had a concussion, which of course they had, but didn't realize it. But they had mostly psychological trauma. And so as I researched it, it became clear that psychological trauma is essentially a concussion. It
Hmm.
causes the same glucose limitation that a concussion does.
Wow, I
So
didn't know that.
people with PTSD start having the same cognitive symptoms that people with concussions have, and people with concussions have the same symptoms like anxiety and depression and that kind of thing that people with PTSD have. And
Wow.
so the symptoms really overlap because both of those things are really glucose limiting injuries. And that's the effect they have. They're what are called chemical injuries, not tissue
Mm.
injuries.
Okay. Okay. So any kind of form of trauma that you've gone through in your life. So being that you're a clinical psychologist as well, so there has to be hand in hand. My dog again went crazy. Hold on. You got the puppy? Okay. So what I was gonna say was that I'm guessing that besides the physical aspect of taking glucose, there's also mental work you need to do as well. I'm being as a psychologist, you have, because I know a lot of things I've done, work with some coaches and people that talk about you have to deal with the trauma that you've gone
Mhm.
through in your life, because it's in your subconscious. So you got to work on all that stuff because it's affecting you in the long run in your life.
And it's a very interesting question. Generally, up to about, and this is rough, but up until about late teens, early 20s, people can just take glucose and it will eliminate anxiety, depression, all of the so called psychological symptoms. After about, we'll just say arbitrarily age 21, it can be a little younger than that. But the person's brain, because it's been losing glucose throughout life, it's hard to be alive and not have a couple of glucose limiting events every year because we drop something and raise up and hit our head, or somebody scares us, or whatever. Um, but after about 21, the brain decides because the glucose level has just kept going down, down, down. The brain decides there's something wrong with me and it's permanent. I'm defective. I'm deficient. I'm unworthy. And as the glucose limitations increase, then it goes to I'm worth less. I'm a failure.
Hmm.
And suicidality starts to happen at that point. And
So
so,
that, wow, wow. So I'm sorry to interrupt you because I'm thinking, so besides the suicide end of it, but also there's people who do drugs or get into any substance abuse or
right,
alcohol. That's also, again, trying to mask the issue.
right. And it's really the brain trying desperately to function in the context of progressively losing glucose. And
Wow.
so the brain gets less and less hopeful as the glucose level reduces. And one of the ways I describe addiction is it's like hospice. You don't expect to recover. You don't think there's anything that can be done about your condition. You just want to be comfortable and as pain free as possible. And that describes the majority of addictions.
Yeah.
As people's brains are refueled with glucose, then they're able to come out of that addiction, out of that hospice like condition, and begin to really live again.
Hmm.
But back to your question for a second. And so once somebody's brain has decided I'm defective, I'm unworthy, I'm worthless, then taking glucose is necessary. But then they also need to relearn that they are, the way I say it, they're infinitely worthy. There's no defect in who they are at all in any way. And the only problem has been loss of glucose and then misinterpretation about what that meant. But when
Like
your
you got
brain,
scrambled messages in the brain, right?
right, exactly. And so for them to know there is nothing wrong with me, I'm just underfueled.
Wow.
And I don't do anything defective. There isn't any bad part of me. When I'm fully fueled, the way I say it is when a person's fully fueled, they will demonstrate and express the image of God in them.
Mm,
They will be loving, they will be patient, they will be compassionate, they will be merciful, they will be able to think, they will be able to control their behavior. I do a lot of work with people in jails and prisons, and the reason people end up in prison is they can't regulate their behavior or their emotions.
right.
And that's, again, a glucose problem.
Wow. Wow. This is like unbelievable. I didn't expect it to get to this extent of how this is such an incredible research and what you're doing. This is awesome to help people out there. So many people. I mean, I think everybody on the planet needs it.
We do,
Basically,
actually.
everybody needs it
Yeah.
because I'm telling you, this for me, this interview is from God because I'm going through it right now. I'm
Yeah.
going through a lot of brain fog every day. I'm having some issues, which is manifest physically now with hyperthyroidism
Yeah.
and stuff that I never had before. Never
Yeah.
had this 6 months ago. Perfect. I was perfect. I
Yeah.
moved and everything, and the move, and all that. That's a lot of stress.
Right.
So since I relocated my life,
Mm-hmm.
it's been it's been taking me a while to get back in, like what's going on, kind of thing.
Right.
So it's just perfect. This is just perfect. This is what I need.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yes, this is really, and then so many people that I know. I know many people who, well, I know several people who had strokes or have had heart attacks. Different things, ailments. I have family members that are ill. Some of them are very ill, and I'm always trying to find a way. How can I help somebody? How can I help myself, but help other people out there? Live a better life.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing what's going on with my mother and my aunt. My poor mother suffers from headaches all day long
Yeah.
for years.
Yep.
She can't function, you know
Um,
and then they found she had a special kind of MRI. There was a research that we're doing, so
mhm.
they did a special imaging and they found the proteins in her brain because they couldn't see it on the regular MRI that they did. I don't know what they did, but that's when they told me that she had it,
And did they eliminate the headaches or no? So glucose will eliminate them.
um so and is this just regular glucose or
No,
is it you have to buy you don't have to have a prescription?
no, you can get
Oh,
it over the counter. Um, Dextrose and glucose are exactly the same thing. Most
Oh,
people prefer to buy dextrose, and then you can mix it in a drink and just drink it, and that makes it easier to take. But you can buy glucose tablets and do the whole treatment that way. Kind of ironically, Smarties candy is pure dextrose. So I work with a lot of kids and teenagers that do their whole process by eating Smarties candy.
wow, Smarties candy. My aunt would do that because she likes candy. So
Yeah.
I need a bag of those, and my mother too. That they have that sweet tooth. They could just take the. They won't know they're getting better.
Yes. Yes. But it's
That's
so incredible that, in my view anyway, God has designed us so that our function is always restorable.
wow.
We don't have to think that we're broken. We don't have to think that we're defective. We can be fully restored as our brains are restored.
This is awesome. This gives me so much hope.
Good.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I have a coach that I'm working with, and we've been discussing that about just, different things you have to get rid of, um, emotions and things that you have to, things that you've learned in the past too, how you've been brought up as a child. There's a
Right.
lot of child trauma
Mm-hmm.
that people don't realize that stay with you.
Right.
And then it forms how you function in life, or
Mm-hmm.
how you make decisions in life. And I guess the biggest, I knew something has been going on with my brain, like it wasn't right, because
Right.
I wasn't like normal. I can tell I'm not. And also I had spurts of anger,
Yeah.
and my husband told me, he says, wow, like what's going on, like wow,
Right. Right.
and I'm like, that's not me. And then I'm like, it's not me. I don't like to be like that. I don't know why I'm getting like that, just
So, did you think you were becoming an angry person?
not angry, just um I don't know, frustrated more because
Yeah.
of it's not easy being a caregiver. It's
No.
not. It's a 24/7. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, thank God that both my mother and my aunt are physically well. Physically they can move around, they can walk, they don't need canes, they don't need none of that stuff,
Yeah.
and they can do function the bathroom, all that stuff. My mother's going to be 87
Wow.
now in February. My aunt just turned 85. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a blessing to still have them around. They're strong as bulls physically. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just now I'm going to start getting some glucose in them and start getting that
There you
brain
go.
function. And I will document it. We'll definitely talk
Yeah.
offline
Yeah.
about this, because I'm telling you, you're a blessing from God right now, because this is something that we all need, and not just my family, but so many people out there.
Yes.
And I know a lot of people. I work with the disabled. A couple of years ago, we had a friend of mine does an event every year, and she puts on some event because she's disabled as well. She has
Mm.
MS, and
Mm.
she's created this incredible thing. They do a fashion show, they sing, they perform in wheelchairs or whatever they are. They're autistic. They're all different types on the spectrum, right? And they're
Yes.
such beautiful people, just beautiful children. It was such a blessing to have that experience that
Yes.
most people don't. You know how people, unfortunately, anything that's different, people are afraid, so they do that kind of thing, or they look weird at people, and they're the most beautiful children. They just unfortunately have a certain function in their brain that's not functioning right.
Yes. That's exactly right. And all those things you mentioned can be restored.
Wow. Even for autism and people.
Yes.
Wow. I have to send you over to my friend Jessie, that she works. She has her programs for helping disabled people, with different um, ways to get Section 8 and different things to help them, because they're limited. They're limited in work.
Mm-hmm.
They're limited in a lot of different things, because people, outcasts, people who are
Right.
different.
Right.
And that's the bottom line. People won't hire them, you know, and,
Right.
and sometimes they're even smarter than us.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Very often, people who are
Super.
diagnosed with autism are very intelligent, but their brain isn't fueling what are called the relational functions. So
Mm,
they don't know how to interact with other people. And one of the ways I describe it to people is it's kind of like if you went to a foreign country and you didn't know a single word of the language and you couldn't learn the language, and people just looked at you and expected that you knew what they were talking about. So to try to have a relationship, to work, to just function in a culture where you did not understand any of the language, you can imagine how frustrating that would be, how
Oof.
anxiety provoking that would be. And
Yes.
for people, particularly on the more severe end of the autistic spectrum, it's like, again, not only do they not know the language, but they can't learn the language. So day
Yeah.
after day after day, they have to look very carefully at behavior. They have to kind of push people away from themselves and just try to get by the best they can. But
Wow.
as their brain gets refueled, then those relational functions come back online, so to speak. And then they can function like everybody else. They can, quote unquote, learn the language of relationships.
Wow. I mean, I've seen so many different spectrums of one girl that I met, young girl. She is not verbal, but she has a computer, so she'll type
Mm-hmm.
in, like Steve Hawkins. She'll
Mm-hmm.
type in and it says what she wants to say, so she can communicate on there and knows
Yes.
the words and knows everything. It's just not verbally. She's not
Right.
able to verbalize it.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, this is a whole different. Um, I mean, it's just a question that came up in my head talking about autism. So
Mm-hmm.
there's been a big increase in autism over the years. It's gotten more and more. I mean, before it was one in maybe say 100,000. Now it's like 1 out of 60 or something. I mean, it's just gotten so bad. I mean, is there something, or have you done anything, something that can be prevented, or is it?
It's um, uh, an important question, but one of the things that results in quote unquote birth defects, the primary cause of that is insufficient glucose in the mother during pregnancy. And so having a mother make sure she has full fueling to her brain before and during pregnancy really will help with that. But very often there's a significant injury that people don't pay attention to or don't connect because they don't know to look for it, that happens, whether it's the cord wrapped around their neck during birth or a fall or some kind of event. Very often that happens. And that's the reason for the development of autism. And people talk a lot about, and there's a lot of controversy about, do vaccines cause autism or do they not? But depending on the vaccine and the reaction to it, that can be another activation of the sympathetic nervous system at a pretty severe level,
Mm,
which limits glucose. And that's ultimately what causes the autism, is the
wow.
brain doesn't have enough fuel, and that person's brain, for
Doesn't
reasons we
have-
don't yet know, but chooses to underfuel or not fuel relational functions because the
Wow.
brain determines there's more important survival functions that it needs to be fueling.
Wow. That's very, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
It's just very interesting. That's why you have to be so careful with children, when they're little,
Mm-hmm.
falls, hit on the head, anything like that. Shaking, baby,
Right, right,
shaking the
right.
baby. That's just. But I was thinking of something, and it was kind of funny, but this is true that happened when I was pregnant. There was a period of time that I remember. I said, "Wow, I feel like the baby's sucking my brain."
Yeah.
Right, right?
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden
Yes.
it's like I can't think right. Like, all the blood's going to the baby, right? So it's probably the
Mm-hmm.
same thing. I didn't have enough glucose. It's
Right.
sucking me. It's sucking all what I have. So now I'm like all confused and just kind of
Mm-hmm.
like
You
weird.
you probably heard people talk about mommy brain,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what they're describing. They don't know or haven't known that it was high glucose burning just in helping that baby develop.
Oof.
But that's the issue. And then, of course, the trauma of birth, being born is traumatic for the mother and the infant,
Oh yes.
and is another glucose limitation for the
Wow.
mother, certainly, and maybe also for the infant.
Wow. So basically, I guess the more traumas you have in your life it's gonna cause you more
Right.
problems.
Right.
So any kind of, oh God, I have a list. Okay, so I need some glucose. I went through when you were talking about that. I went through a drug issue
Mm.
many years ago, and and I know it was fueled by a trauma that I went through, and then I started doing drugs. Right, so it
Hmm.
was kind of hand in hand.
Right. Right.
And then, of course, the drug I was doing cocaine. It took over me for a while.
Right.
I was
Right.
very young. I was like 24 years old or something.
Hmm.
And thank God I was able to get out of it completely, cold turkey, with God's grace,
That's
because
amazing.
it took a lot. I was very physically, I was addicted. I was 24 years old, and I weighed like 85 pounds
Yeah.
because I was just,
Yeah.
I don't even know how I was alive, honestly. I'm like,
Hmm.
God had a purpose for me to still be around, because
Yes.
I knew many people that had OD'd or
Right.
died, and nowadays, if people do, I mean, thank God I don't touch any drugs, but I'm like, nowadays it's even more dangerous, because now it's not just cocaine or heroin. Now they're sticking fentanyl in drugs and other stuff
Right.
too, that people think they're going out one day, oh, I'll have a good time today, and boom, they got fentanyl, they're dead the next day, or the
Right.
night. So, but again, I've learned that, like you said, the traumas affect your brain, your glucose levels,
Hmm.
and those traumas. So that fight and flight. So when you have that trauma, you're afraid, or something happened to you, somebody attacks you, your brain goes into survival mode,
Hmm.
right? And
Right.
that's when it starts the fuel, and then
Yes.
it cuts it off.
Right. Yep.
Okay, so a person. All right, so this is a good example. A person who's in a domestic abuse relationship,
Hmm.
and say, for example, the woman's getting beaten by her husband,
Right.
on a daily basis. So she's going through constant fight or flight, constant. So her brain is mush by the time,
Yep.
like there's no, she almost loses her ability to control anything, I think, right?
Progressively, yes. If it continues, then people lose the ability to function. I talk about it becomes a situation, or can become a situation, of adult failure to thrive, that people's glucose level gets low enough that they start not even being able to stay standing up. They start having falls. They
Wow.
have muscle weakness. And that's obviously in a severe situation. But yes, as glucose continues to lower, the brain will function the things, will fuel the things that are necessary for your function. But as you lose more and more glucose, then it comes down to the brain's going to make sure you have enough glucose to breathe and for your heart to beat and for you to digest food. But it will continue limiting more and more function to make sure you have enough to stay alive.
Wow. Wow. It's amazing. It's really amazing.
Yes.
You know, Something so simple could actually change you. And I was trying to figure out the Smarties. I just looked at them. I used to eat those all the time when I was little.
Right.
Man,
Right.
I'm gonna go get a bag of Smarties.
There you
We're
go.
all day popping us.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, I thank you so much. We've been on here an hour, but this was an incredible conversation. I mean, I hope that my everybody out there, and it'll be on YouTube, so people can view it anytime they want, also. And I hope that people really listen to this broadcast, because it was very, very helpful for so many people. I think that I'm going to share this to everybody that I know, because they need to listen to it. I know so many people going through what I'm going through with that, physical issues that are being
Mhm.
caused by the brain, basically.
Yes.
Um, and
And let
it's,
me, I just finished a book.
oh wow,
There we go.
restored hope.
Yes.
Ooh, I got to get a copy of that one.
And it's available on Amazon. You talked a lot about hope, and there is hope in the biblical description of it is not something that's a possibility, but it's something that's a given. And with glucose, restoration of people's function is a given. It will happen.
Well, so people out there, it's Christmas. Christmas is coming. Buy this book, Restore Hope. I'm going to get the link and everything, and then I'll put it online so everybody can see it, because I think we can all need to be restored hope, restored our brains. And I'm looking forward to going through this next journey here with this, because I really want my brain to function the way it's supposed to be. And not too many people realize that they're having this problem. I don't think a lot of people are that in tune to their bodies,
Right.
that
Right.
they'll think that a pain in the knee is caused by whatever, what I mean, like I don't know how to explain it, but I don't think people realize they don't really in tune on what's going on, and how everything's connected. I mean, your brain is right here, your head,
Right.
it holds is right on the top. So of course this is connecting everything. I mean, sometimes you have to be like silly and tell people things because they don't understand.
Right.
It's like, I try to explain things to people that, look at this. It's a simple, buy some Smarties. Look at that. We're
Right.
going to make Smarties famous again. They've been around for what, 75 years or something, those candies?
Probably.
They've
Yes.
been around forever. Everybody used to get those. You can buy them at Walmart. I just looked them up. A whole
Yep.
bag for $4.
There you go.
$4. And you buy
Yep.
some Smarties and you get some brain function. Look at that. I
Yep.
can't believe it.
Yep. Exactly.
So thank you, Dr. Stevens. This was an incredible podcast, an interview, and I really, really appreciate you.
You're welcome. So happy to do it.
So I told everybody again, his website is called restoredhumanity.com. So go to restoredhumanity.com and you can find out more about Dr. Stevens, and your contact information is there as well. So you
Yep.
can contact him here, and it has his phone number and his email. So if you have more information, you can go again to restoredhumanity.com and be able to get all this information. And then look him up also on Amazon. I'll get that link and I'll look up the book.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and have a great holiday and a
Thank
happy new year.
you too. Thanks again.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
So everybody, again, I lost myself. There we go. I can't even have the words to say how incredible this interview was. And I really, really say this was a blessing from God. So I believe a lot in God, and I'm here because of him, because if I wasn't, trust me, I've had things in my life that if I didn't have the belief in God and the spiritual, emotional, everything, belief, okay, I wouldn't be here. I just wouldn't be here. So things happen for a reason. Nothing is a coincidence. Okay. So people remember that. Nothing is a coincidence. You're like, oh, this happened. Yeah. Okay. Because it's supposed to happen. And this interview was supposed to happen because right now I'm going through this brain fog that I can't stand. And I'm going to get rid of it with Dr. Stevens. And I hope you out there too. Please look him up again, restoredhumanity.com. Find all the information. I will post on all social media about the books and all the links so you have it. All right. So I hope everybody has a great holiday season. I probably won't be doing any more. I might do a little live, but most of the next couple of weeks, since the holidays coming and Christmas, I'm kind of a little busy with family and friends. So I will not be back till January. Right now, I have one. Let me just see here. My first, January 7th, I have an interview for an author expert, and we're going to be talking about breast cancer. And so I'm always bringing you things like that. I'm going to be talking about a lot of physical things. Let's see how we can get healthy. 2025, okay? Let's make 2025 the best year ever, and the best you too, the best version of you. So that's what we need to do for 2025. And remember, it's never too late to reboot your mindset. You can always do that, even though you struggle. And I tell you personally, I've been struggling for a couple of months now. And yes, I get depressed. I get all these weird symptoms, okay? Digestive issues, and I've lost weight. I mean, yeah, it's nice to lose weight, but not when you're not healthy. So I've lost weight because of not being well. And I can't believe that a simple solution like this might just resolve all my issues. So I'm going to be a test. I'm going to do the test, and I'm going to write it down and keep you informed of how I do. Okay, because that's the only way. believe people unless you see it, you don't believe it, right? So I have to be the guinea pig. So I'm going to be it because I want my brain function completely back. Um, I had COVID like 3 times, and that really just was not good. And I feel like I still have remnants of that. And I know a lot of people out there that had COVID, that had different things, that have been, being sick. I have a friend out there that had a stroke about 2 years ago, and I know you're not doing so great. And I'm going to call you. You're going to see this video because I think you need this too. We all do. We all do. All right. So let's be the best that we can be for 2025. So anyway, Happy New Year. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to everybody. And I will see you in the new year and a new me. There you go. Bye. What I forgot.
Lovely.
No.